Hi folks, thanks for coming and thanks for our new member, glad to have you. It's my great pleasure to introduce Lanie Abrams, an art therapist for 46 years and an MFT for 24. I asked if there was something unique about her and she said, yes, she has grandchildren. I thought that was really, really wonderful. But I'm really happy because when I was looking for an art therapist to come and talk with you folks about the art of aging, everybody said, get Lanie, get Lanie, get Lanie. And then I called her and she said, no, I'm too busy. But she called back and I'm really grateful to have her here today. Would you please welcome Lanie Abrams.
Let's see, it works? The microphone?
And if you stand up on the stage, it's back there.
Get my cheat sheet too.
Thanks, Jess.
So the art of aging, if that's the subject, I'll give it to you in one phrase. Color your hair. This has been actually very joyful for me to talk on the subject I'm going to talk on because it's my favorite issue that has come out of my own work. And that is, I think, is that too loud?
Not loud.
Oh, okay. I titled it Reintegration of the Imagination, or image, that comes from the word imagination, in healing. And I'm hoping it'll be interesting to you guys. Is there anyone in this group that's dealing with any kind of physical problem, either minor or major? Great, okay, this is the group that I'm talking to. So, I want to share a little, some quotes that I gathered, and then I went back to my own roots in childhood to see where this idea came from, which is the child's mind, of using imagery for healing the physical body. Of course, imagery is used in all kinds of ways for healing spiritual, emotional, but I'm going to focus more on the physical, specific physical issues. So I found this wonderful quote, or a few quotes, from a book from 1985, which I kind of did my discovery more in the 70s, but this is by Jean Achterberg, if I pronounce it right. And she says what she does, and it's kind of a perfect fit for what I'll be talking about. She brings together modern scientific research and the practices of the earliest healers to support her claim that imagery is the world's oldest and most powerful healing resource. And so when I talk about healing, you know, that can be a lot of different things. We might heal something emotionally and not physically. We might heal something spiritually and not completely physically. Or we might heal physically. So, you know, think of the bigger picture when I talk about healing. So the other piece that I got from Jean Achterberg is how there are kind of two ways that the image can impact health. And when I talk about image, again, that's huge because everything is image. I mean, you look outside, you see images, trees. I look out here, I see images of faces. So that word covers so much of the way we think and what we're surrounded by. But she talked about two different kinds of the way image can impact health, to simplify it. One is transpersonal. And so I brought this, which I bought from Sonoma State in the early 70s. It was like my big purchase when I first moved up here. And it was done, it's the Huichol Mexican Indian healing bowl kind of drawing that they often do. And the transpersonal is more of like the shamanic, where energy is transmitted from one body to another. And I guess that's how shamans work. And a lot of different healing groups might work that way. But so this is a picture of the shaman and the feathers from the bird energy, and the deer, who is known to be a healing spirit with strong symbolic meaning to it. And then this is the patient here on the rug. And down here, it's just another big part of the story. I have to find which folder I have this story in, but I haven't been able to locate it. But it's more nature, the ocean, 3 stars. So that's transpersonal. What I'm going to talk about is pre-verbal, which is language before we learn language, verbal word language. And so pre-verbal is really, we're born with this innate, hardwired know-how to use imagery for healing. And that was lost, you know, for many hundreds of years for different reasons. I have a quote that explains one of the reasons, but I want to move on. So as I'm going through my examples, you may remember ways that you did something like this, and I'm going to interrupt my next half hour or so just so that we can hear any examples that you've come up with. So I have a lot of respect for the child's mind, and talking on this subject gave me a way to go back to my roots and find where it began for me. Okay, so 10 years old at the dentist, and that was in 1956. I think it was around 10. And he didn't use Novocaine. I don't know if Novocaine was commonly used then, but I remember he did not use Novocaine. And sitting in the chair, beginning to drill, and I dissociated purposely. I transposed myself into a visual image. It's a little embarrassing, but I don't know why at 10 years old I came up with this, but I was sitting on a park bench in this beautiful park, and some young boy was coming up to me, and it was like a very strong positive image to help combat or deal with the pain of the drilling. And so, you know, that was cool. And I used it a lot over the years, just my own little private thing. Okay, then at about 13, I was walking home back east from school on a snowy, freezing cold day. And, you know, what happens to your body when you're cold and you're outside? You like crunch up and you shiver and everything. So I'm walking down the hill, and I just thought of, like, what might you think of? Anybody?
A beach in Florida.
A beach in Florida.
Fireplace.
Fireplace. Fireplace, yeah, okay. Got the idea. I thought of a sun, a strong, warm sun radiating down. And the exciting thing for me to think back is how, again, it wasn't taught to me to do that kind of thing. It comes naturally, somehow, to do that. And so I visualized and thought of the sun warming up my shoulders And I can remember walking down my hill and being able to relax my shoulders and feel warmer. And the effect of the image and holding the visualization strongly affects us physically. I mean, you've probably done exercises that demonstrate something similar. The guy who says, close your eyes and cut up a lemon and start sucking on the lemon, and most people wind up salivating just thinking about it. So these physical responses are actual. So when we think of, so anyway, with those two examples, do any similar ideas bubble up for anybody? Maybe from childhood or maybe recently? Okay.
I live alone and I have a problem with being lonely. And when I go to bed at night, I consult with my higher power and do something for me, and then I feel this warmth coming into my body, and I feel as if I'm being held, and I go to sleep.
That's lovely. Self-healing, oops. That's really what we're talking about, self-healing. How, you know, I always said with physical issues, what I've learned is I have 50% at least to play, and the doctor or medical community has the other 50%. So, okay, good. Moving on. So a few premises that I would say, if you're in agreement with, and you probably will be, will certainly help as I go through a series of how to do this according to me. A lot of people have their own ways of using imagery and healing. But so one premise is that to the brain, imagery is real. It's the same nerve bundles that light up for events, real or imagined. That's pretty powerful. Another tenet would be imagery is the language of the body. Pre-verbal body language. How does the body talk to us? In words? Not really. Dream images, the body really speaks in its symbolic imagery. And body language is imagery. I have a tight knot in my stomach. I mean, we have a lot of phrases that can associate, you know, and so how do we use that imagery for, well, the image, when really defined, speaks to all parts of us, our mental, our emotional, our spiritual. So it's really a language that is nice in its broad reach. It connects, imagery connects the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere. It helps the brain. There are many ways that we do restorative work as art therapists in just the brain area. Imagery also is the language that brings the brain stem connected to the neocortex. So it's a valuable part of our system. And I'm not going to go into the brain stuff more. I know that Chance could do that for us. But so here's another quote. Who is this from? I don't know. The psychological principle affirms that every change in the mental, emotional state, conscious or unconscious, is accompanied by an appropriate change in the physical state. And conversely, that cells and tissues and bones are all communicative in some neural pathway. Okay, and you may remember in the early 70s, the Symingtons, who were a married couple, worked with cancer, and they had their patients draw the cancer cell, the healing therapies, the healthy cells, and people developed their own dynamic story over how one group of cells affects the other, and they had them draw them. But when I read their work, they used pencil drawings, and I couldn't believe it as an art therapist to limit the drawing to pencil drawings. So I Googled Chance the other night, and I was watching because I didn't know anything about him, and he invited me in. And I appreciate watching and getting his information. He said something about details, like the brain is user-friendly and sparks more as we focus in on details. And the details, art, imagery, the details, the language of art is line, color, shape, symbol. That's like noun, pronoun, verb. Those are what make up an image or a drawing. And that's what connects strongly our ability to respond to an image. So,
You want me to hold that up?
no,
so
can everybody see these pictures? Not really? Oh, maybe you could. So, okay, 3 or 4 steps to begin, and what I'm talking about is a natural resource internally, an organic resource. Now, some people use healing images, maybe thinking of healing water or light or a crystal or maybe some religious symbols, and that all works. But what I'm talking about is finding a healing image that comes up out of the problem. So in my work and in my own issues, that's what I do. I go into the problem. So the best way to get in touch with going inside, and you've probably all been to know this information, we relax, sit in a comfortable space, take a few breaths, stretch, because the internal environment works best in a relaxed state, and imagery comes up better in a relaxed state. So, you warm up by stretching, relaxing, closing your eyes, or not. Going to the problem. What does it feel like? Not a medical x-ray notebook picture. What does that area feel like? How big is it? What size? Is it moving? So we ask these kinds of imagery questions to ourselves and get a sense. So this is one example to show this process. This was a patella, from the leg to the thigh. I was playing volleyball. I worked for Adult Day Treatment Center in the 70s, and we challenged Oakcrest to a volleyball game. And it was in that volleyball game I hurt my patella. And so it was a big deal. I had to get a ride to work, and it hurt, and of course in the beginning, all that stuff. So I did a picture of it, and it was just so satisfying. Chance wanted me to give a plug for the arts and seniors, and I just have to say, because I continue to do my own artwork and crafts work, that it is so joyful to find that hobby or, arts process that clicks for you. It's very rejuvenating, and brings all benefits. But, okay, so it's funny, I love this picture, and here it was of a hurt place, but you can wind up even liking something that hurts. And notice, it's not pastel. If I wouldn't have been in touch with the hurt if I were using pink and powder blue. I mean, the idea, if you're doing this in an art way, some people might just visualize, but if you're doing it in an art way, you really want to get those details of, does this feel sharp? Is it pointy? Is it soft and circular? And so I pretty much caught this the way it felt. Then Carl Jung says, often in pictures where you're drawing the problem, a symbol of reconciliation comes through. So I always felt this little area here was my symbol that was going to come through. And then it's interesting, I do my little sperm fish kind of doodles coming down. So then a few weeks, or not a few weeks, a few days or a week later, when you feel you're ready for a next step of moving the image and visualizing it again, I took the rough edges, zeroed in, zoomed in, and just fish appeared, like fish, because it became a little river. So I didn't think fish river when I thought of my hurt knee, but if you allow yourself to go through a process, one calls for the next. It can grow out of the next. So, next picture, please. So then the idea is, okay, to begin to send these fish with that inner visualization down to the knee and let them swim around and soften it up. So then this, a few days later, or maybe a week later, was the next really transformative image, because a lot of healing, and you feel the healing when you kind of see your picture, or you feel your knee. And it's a way of communicating with yourself. It's like, knee, I get you. It's a very satisfying inner getting your body and your. So this, the river turned into more growth and green and healing. The fish became more distinct, and a seahorse came up. Oh, that was cute, that was cool. I think I did look, seahorses represent change or transition. So then the final image, and that's sort of what I go for, the healing image that you can then use forever, or particularly for the area that you're working with. So then I got my fish that was like super. And I had goldfish as a child. Maybe it pulls up part of that child energy of liking goldfish. And so that was the fish that it could be specific to send that fish that I really befriended down into the knee and help soothe it and do more healing. So during the seahorse picture, I did some creative writing about it, and that's another thing that's nice to bridge. If you're working with healing something, an image brings us to words that we wouldn't have come up with before. And again, it's the creative writing, it's using both sides of the brain. So when I was doing this one, the words were, I am a stream flowing down a steep slope. I am eroding the rough edges of the rocks and the other bank. I am growing green. I am 3 fish and a seahorse. My seahorse is a strong vehicle for carrying cargo. I am 3 fish who are slithering, floating, flopping, and sliding. So you get to enjoy your little creative gestalting the image and coming up with words that express something. So the steps are, get in a relaxing environment, internal environment, go into the problem, see what's there, see what it's calling for, and maybe go step by step rather than the final end product of like a perfect healing image. The body works slower than the psyche. So that's why I like to do it in steps and keep a little more in the rhythm that the body is working in. So, this is an example of a client who, I'm just showing this to show 2 steps in a bigger process, or just 2 steps. But the red is a lot of anxiety in the chest. And it had roots growing down into her gut. That was interesting. And we put it up on the wall and looked at it, and I said, and I don't always do this, it's not like you have to go for a healing image, but I said, I wonder if there's something that would help that image. And she thought, because I don't explain how to do this, and she said, oh, I'll throw a bucket of water at it. And she's only 25, so has, And I said, well, how about if we do one small step towards that? And so then she brought some blue down to help cool off the red, irritating feeling. And so I think that's a good teachable moment in keeping pace, breaking things down into steps so that they're more easily digestible. So, anybody have any thoughts or ideas just from what I've been presenting? Does it bring anything up? Hey!
I think that it's interesting that the seeds of your healing were there in the hurt. The sperm going around eventually becomes the glorious healing fish that you have used. And it's kind of like a matter of trust, trusting in your own processes to get there.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is often the case. And, unconscious stuff comes up when you draw. You don't know what's going to come out, but often you find your language. And I often have people work with their non-dominant hand. So anybody that's saying, oh, I could never do that. Art therapy is really for everyone. It's just getting scribbles down and you go from there. Okay. This is interesting from the Mayo Clinic. Beginning to paint, draw, or sculpt in old age could actually ward off the muddled thinking and slips in memory that befall many. Those that began moving on creative impulses were 73% less likely to develop mental. Craft hobbies, such as woodworking or quilting, 45% improved on mental lapses. So that was interesting that the creative arts is like a little more using brain restoring neurons than the hobbies. But I recommend both. I think hobbies and creative work is all one. So just to finish, I wanted to show, I saw this on Facebook last week or two, and it was just so delightful, and many of you, circulate in all different residential treatment centers or day treatment centers, but they had a picture of 4 older women, looked like in a residence or something, sitting around a table with a huge mandala printed on the table. And the 4 of them were drawing with felt tips in this one mandala. And it looked like fun, which it is. And it was such a nice way for the 4 women to socialize, to be engaged. And so I had this book, so I'm just bringing it to show what kind of image could be very user-friendly for that. I mean, it has a lot of adult coloring books. That's not a bad thing for relaxing. So they could be blown up, and that would be a great little activity. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for, I'm grateful for learning about you guys.
Well, thank you, Lanie. Is there any questions? Do we have any questions? I had a question as to how would I apply this to any of my clients that I might have? I mean, do I get out the adult coloring books, or I'm wondering about that.
It's very specific. The first thing of how to apply it is to do it with yourself. Learn some of it. Believe. I have a total belief in the value and use of imagery, so do it yourself. And then maybe you'll just be talking with a client and you might think, well, is there an image that helps you to think about that in a better way? Like, rather than a thought, you might ask, is there an image? And that could be, it takes a degree of cognitive differentiation to use imagery, to use visualization, but everybody's on a different uphill or downhill use of that. So, yeah.
I was curious, when you do these drawings or help people do these drawings, what do you find is the best to use medium? It's hard to tell from here. Are these like crayon, or what are they?
Felt tip, I use pastels, either chalk pastels or oil pastels, because I work with adults, and so the crayons aren't as, and the colors are much better with oil pastels, crayons, they're really great. The chalky pastels would be too messy for probably, but yeah. Dry medium, easy, simple.
I noticed when you were speaking, you referred to young. I assume you meant Carl Young.
Yes.
So do you have a background in some form of psychotherapy that you apply to it afterwards? Or I guess my question is there a level of projection and self-imposing as far as our opinions and our gut instincts that apply to us onto clients, and how this might manipulate their care in maybe not necessarily an intentioned
Right.
way?
That's why you don't practice something until you do have a better understanding of it. I've been an art therapist since 1969 and an MFT since '91. And so I have studied all the Freud, Jung, Gestalt, all of the psychological, and I work in psychotherapy. But it's probably like a lawyer in a courtroom. I don't lead what the client's going to do, and I don't give my projected interpretations. As an art therapist, you learn very well how to pull from their inner resource and how to help them be open to their next step. I might suggest, you know, paint rather than clay, or the medium that, you know.
So essentially it becomes, for people like us that aren't trained necessarily in psychotherapy, more of a conversation starter, say in a group environment?
You mean for yourself or for your clients?
Well, yeah, for clients, or, I mean, if you're working with a small group of people in a home, or if you're, you know, a home care person who's trying to start a dialogue with a patient, or however you want to.
I wouldn't expect yourself to have any answers, but you might begin a dialogue with, what pictures do you carry in your mind? What image brings you a sense of security or calm? You know, you could talk about that brings up imagery. That might be, you know, I wouldn't expect you to go do this kind of thing with your clients until you know you've done it with yourself, but no one has a, you know, a patent on using imagery for healing. So it, you know, just might be a topic of conversation. Thank you.
Okay, let's thank Lanie again.